Hi there, it's Bruce Wallace from Dundee and Victoria Chess Club in Bonnie, Scotland. And I'm going to bring you another game from Kasparov series of books on my great predecessors. This is from the second volume, which deals with the world champions after Alekhine. But they're fantastic books because they not only contain the games of the world champions, but the games of their challengers, and also the games of those players who could have become world champion. One such candidate being David Bronstein, who was an absolutely fabulous player. He died last year, but he was a great innovator in the opening. And here he's black, playing a match between Moscow and Prague in 1946, and it's a King Indian defence. His opponent here is a player called Ludwig Pachman, who has white. So Pachman kicks off with d4, and we'll quickly move through the opening here. And it's a fianchetto variation of the King's Indian defence, which was a fairly new opening in 1946. And Bronstein here, who was only 22, produces some startling innovations in the opening. Both sides castle, and then white plays b3. Now, white's plan here is to develop his bishop to c1, where it will counteract black's dark squared bishop on b7. But it also gives black an immediate plan of playing his pawn to a5 and then to a4, hitting the b3 pawn. So white hasn't fully developed, but black already has a plan. So Bronstein begins by centralizing his e8 rook, and then white plays e4. Bronstein takes the pawn on d4, knight takes, then Bronstein plays knight c5, and this is the first piece to come in, hitting the b3 pawn. White continues naturally with rook e1, and now Bronstein continues with his plan. a5, white develops his bishop to b2 as planned, and then a4. Now pawn and knight hit the b3 pawn. White plays rook c1, and his plan is to bring the bishop back to a1, defended by the rook. Black plays c6, bishop back to a1, and then a takes b, a takes b. Now Bronstein develops pressure on the b pawn, first of all with queen b6, but also positioning the queen on this diagonal towards the white king. And he's also threatening knight to g4. So to counteract that, and also to constrict the bishop, white plays h3, natural enough. Knight f to d7, potentially coming to e5 if black wishes. White now plays rook b1. The aim of this move to free up the queen, because the queen must defend the b pawn, which is hit twice. Now Bronstein plays a bit of a paradoxical move. Instead of playing the knight to e5 first, he plays the knight to f8, which maintains the pressure and has white guessing as to black's intentions. Naturally enough, white moves his king to h2, getting off the back rank. And now Bronstein innovates with a breach of classical principles by playing h5. And he comments in the book that he always loved to use this pawn as a battering ram. So another surprise for white. White, naturally enough, develops the rook to e2, and black continues with the battering ram approach with h4, and white now plays rook d2. And Bronstein makes an important point about the King's Indian opening, but also on the issue of development, that despite the rook on a8 and the bishop on c8 never having moved, they are both beautifully developed. The rook on the a file and the bishop on the c8 h3 diagonal, attacking h3. And after rook d2 from white, black shatters white's queen side with the move. Can you see it? Halt the video. Rook takes a1, which forces one defender of b3 to move. Rook takes back, then bishop takes knight, rook takes d4, and now the b pawn falls decisively. Knight takes b3. This does allow the knight to take one of the rooks, but white to take d6. Now, what if white here takes back the exchange with knight takes rook? We have the continuation knight d5, queen takes f2, knight f6 check, king h8, knight takes e8, takes g check, king h1, knight c2, and then queen c1, threatening to come in to h6 with mating threats. So big advantage to white there. Black's probably got to exchange queens with queen e1 check, leaving white in the game. So after rook takes d6, black doesn't bother with that. He plays the decisive move, queen takes f2, which is incredibly strong. What if black gets greedy here? White gets greedy here and takes the knight on b3. There then follows the pretty h takes g check, king h1, and the bishop moves for the first time decisively with bishop h3. Bishop can't take back because it's queen h2 mate. So after the bishop takes, white must move the rook to g1, and then it's bishop takes g2, check, rook takes, queen f1 check, the rook must interpose, rook g1, and it's queen h3 mate. A pretty little mate there. So the knight is immune after queen takes f2, so he plays rook e2, and the continuation is queen takes, king h1, queen takes the knight, rook a3, bishop now moves for the first time, taking the pawn. Bishop can't take back because it's queen takes bishop check, and there's all sorts of threats. Rook takes knight, and bishop takes bishop check, king takes, queen takes pawn, rook d4, queen e6, rook takes pawn on b7, then rook a8, queen e2, and now a pretty little finish from Bronstein here, h3 check, and white resigns because basically black has 3 pawns for the exchange, his king is completely safe, and white will exchange pieces off and will win the endgame easily. So in overview and summary of the game here, it was a King's Indian defence, fianchetto variation, in which white came up with the plan of developing his bishop to b2, but gave black the plan of, after some exchanges, of using the a pawn as a battering ram against b3, then ganging up on the b pawn, but also creating threats against white's king. And after the paradoxical move knight f8, Bronstein continued it with a battering ram plan of using the h pawn against the king's position, and then the exchange sacrifice, which destroyed white's queen side, and then decisively continuing with a direct attack on white's king, which led to simplification and forcing white to resign before he lost the endgame, particularly against a player of such technique as Bronstein. A fantastic example of innovation and how deadly the King's Indian defence can be in the hands of somebody like Bronstein, and I hope you enjoyed that game, and I intend to bring you some more of Bronstein's brilliances from Kasparov's fantastic book on My Great Predecessors Part 2. See you soon on YouTube.